good morning for those Springbok supporters who are listening. Not a good morning for the All Black supporters amongst us, including myself. You are listening to episode 9 of the Blindside Rugby Podcast with me, Chris Hattingh. I wouldn't call myself the most depressed All Black supporter in the world, but I feel like I'm pretty close. Of course, coming to you this week after watching one of the worst performances by an All Blacks team for as long as I can remember. Even when they lost against Ireland a couple of years ago, they didn't play that badly. But this was taking mistakes and discipline issues and all of that to a whole nother level. So very, very unfortunate. I don't want to take any credit. Eddie. I've got Eddie Jones on the mind. I don't want to take any credit away from Australia. I thought they played exceedingly well. Forced the All Blacks into lots of mistakes. They clearly knew their game plan well. They knew where to pressure the All Blacks, especially at ruck time and with their line speed. Nick White, the Wallabies scrum half, was very good with his rate of passing and getting the ball out from rucks. I think on average it was something like 3 or 4 seconds, if that long, that it took them, the Australians, to get the ball out from the point of contact. So very, very impressive. And yeah, overall I am very worried about the All Blacks at this point in time. I know a lot of people have faith in Steve Hansen and his assistant coaches and the plans that they seem to have, that they're trying, and maybe there are good signs here and there, but there's something about the attitude that's off to me, that's wrong. But let's see. Of course, they've got the second Bledisloe Cup game this coming weekend at Eden Park. In this game last year, Beauden Barrett scored 4 tries, so if we can have a repeat performance of that, I'd be very, very happy, man. So let's see what happens. Just to recap the game from the past weekend, or the 2 games, because we also had South Africa against Argentina in the Rugby Championship. So in the first game, Australia beat New Zealand by 47 points to 26. Maybe I just wanted to read that as 37 points to 26, but no, it's 47 points to 26. Can you believe it, guys? Oh, man. To watch an All Black team get beaten that handily, jeez. I'm not used to that sort of thing, but what can you do? The Australians were simply better on the day. And the All Blacks are going to have to take the lessons and get better. One of the big talking points, Scott Barrett's red card. I think, from a personal point of view, I don't think he deserved a red card, maybe a yellow. But if you charge in like that with your shoulder on a player's head, you're going to bring the referee into play. And the referee's discretion and his interpretation of the rules, and you're putting it completely in his control. So it's out of your own control. And then it's up to the referee's discretion. So a big mistake there by Scott Barrett. But in general, the All Blacks, I think the Wallabies got under the All Blacks' skin. There was a shove by Ardie Savia on the Australian captain, Michael Hooper, and that was a penalty then for Australia. So those sorts of things, I think the All Blacks were on their heels the whole game pretty much from the beginning. And that's the result of their own mistakes and also good Wallaby pressure. The All Blacks kept making handling errors, knock-ons. I wish... Well, okay, maybe it won't be a good idea, but I should record myself watching. I should have recorded myself watching that All Blacks game. It was just... I was getting really, really frustrated with the knock-ons and stuff. When a team plays well and they beat the All Blacks, then I give that opposition team full credit. When the All Blacks play badly, making their own handling mistakes, knock-ons, wayward passes, silly, idiotic kicks, like really, really stupid kicks out of hand, just little grubbers from your own 22 that don't do anything, that result in nothing, that are kicked out directly to an opposition player. These sorts of things. And penalties, of course, silly penalties. I don't know. That really gets to me. And the All Blacks are making a lot of these mistakes. And I think that's a result of them trying too hard to do certain things, and then also the opposition applying a lot of pressure on them, to their credit. So Scott Barrett's red card, deserved, given he made contact with Michael Hooper's head. using his shoulder. So I think he got a 3-game ban on top of the red card. It could have been the 6, but he put in a very early plea of guilty. And he's also got a spotless disciplinary record. Well, it was. Now, not so much anymore. But he put in that plea of guilty. So out for 3 games. He'll obviously be back at the World Cup. But that was a big one. I think the Wallabies would have still won. And I find it interesting that I say that. I haven't really thought about this in depth, but honestly, they played really, really well. They dominated the vast majority of that game. Maybe they wouldn't have scored as many tries if the All Blacks had 15 players on the field, but I think Australia could have still won that game. That's how good they were against 15 All Blacks. I guess the only positive sign so far, or before I get that, let's go through a few more standout things from the game before I get to my takeaways. There's still this weird dynamic with Richie Mo'unga and Beauden Barrett, with Mo'unga at fly half and Barrett at fullback. Barrett did stand in at fly half a few times, taking the ball up and also distributing it, and he scored a good try, which he cut through the Wallabies defense after receiving a pass from Richie Mo'unga. But I don't think they're settling in well into this sort of dual pivot role. I don't know if there's enough time to get this right before the World Cup. Maybe he should just start with Beauden Barrett at fly half and then bring on Richie from the bench. Or start Richie and then bring on Beauden as a good impact player with his pace. I think that might be quite good. So there's still issues to iron out there. I mentioned Sevilla. He got a penalty for his shove on Michael Hooper. Very uncharacteristic. I think that's the first time I've seen him do something like that this whole season, which has been his best season of rugby, I think, in his whole career. But it shows you how the Wallabies even got under his skin. And then, to recap, Nick White from the Wallabies, the scrum half, he was very good. Very quick service. He got to the rucks quickly. He talked to his outside backs well, I think, especially his fly-off and his forwards. And he kept the All Blacks guessing. He had a few runs and then a few passes. He alternated well between the two, which kept the All Blacks on their toes. And that's always good as a scrum half. You try and keep the opposition guessing as much as you can so they can't sail into what they think you're going to do. Okay. So, as awful as that performance was against Australia, I think the best thing for me this whole week has been listening to the players and the coaches' interviews after the game. And no one is putting the loss on Scott Barrett's red card. Steve Hansen said, discipline let them down a lot, obviously. And they had to play with 14 men, which means the 14 players on the field have to do extra work, and that catches up with them later in the game. I think there's no point, from my personal point of view, no point in whining about the referee. You can't do anything about his decisions. You must only focus on what you can control. This culture of accountability and responsibility is vital if the All Blacks are going to improve the World Cup before the World Cup. So maybe there's some good signs that they're at least honest about things, that they're taking ownership. But of course that can only go so far without implementation and work. So let's see what happens this weekend against the Wallabies. If they cut out their errors, if they do better at not infringing the line of discipline. So let's see what happens with that. Okay. Just for the game again on the weekend, New Zealand and Australia, the lineup for the All Blacks. We've got Joe Moody and then Dane Coles at hooker. We've got Nepo Lalala. Patrick Tuipulotu comes in for Scott Barrett at lock with Sam Whitelock. Ardie Savia starts at 6. Sam Kane at open side flank and Kieran Reid at number 8. Then Aaron Smith at scrum half. Richie Mo'unga is back at fly half. George Bridge at left wing. Sonny Bill Williams at inside centre. Anton Leonard-Brown at outside centre. Sevu Reece at right wing, and Beauden Barrett at fullback. Beauden Barrett's brother, Geordie Barrett, he's on the bench. Also on the bench, Nani Lamape, TJ Perenara, and Jackson Hemopo. I was hoping Hemopo would get a start instead of Patrick Tuipulotu, but Tuipulotu is obviously more experienced, so maybe that's why Steve Hansen went with him. The biggest thing for me, the biggest issue I have with this lineup is Sonny Bill Williams at inside centre. I don't know why they keep picking him to start ahead of Nani Laumape. It really boggles my mind. I think he's way behind the pace on international rugby, honestly. Maybe I'm more depressed about this team selection than I was about the result against the Wallabies, to be honest. Because it's, I don't know. I feel like they're just going to repeat the same patterns and the same issues. He doesn't do much for me in this All Blacks lineup. But hopefully he can prove me wrong. So let's see. That's my biggest issue with this lineup. Is Sonny Bill Williams at 12. But let's see. Obviously, we've got Richie Monga at fly half, Bowden Barrett at fullback, so they're keeping on with that combination. Let's see how that goes. I'm glad Sevu Reece is back on the right wing, and that Sevilla stays at number 6, so more game time for him there. He needs to get as much game time before the World Cup as possible. Those combinations now need to really settle, as the World Cup is getting closer and closer. And then, obviously, George Bridge gets a start on the left wing. Very interesting, the two Crusaders wings. Young guys starting in a big game against the Wallabies at Eden Park. Hopefully they can front up and deliver the goods. So we'll see. A really good opportunity for them to show what they can do. Just in terms of tactics, what I think with the All Blacks, I think they're trying too hard to play, what we'd call All Black rugby, like running rugby, attacking rugby, that sort of thing. And they just need to focus on back to basics. They really, really need to go back to that mantra of just catch and pass, make the ball do the work, kick from your own 22. Don't put yourself under unnecessary pressure. Don't make silly disciplinary and handling mistakes. That's a big thing. I think if they can manage for the first 20 minutes or so against the Wallabies this weekend to not give away silly penalties or yellow cards or knock on the ball that much, hopefully not at all, then I think we'll see this team play to its potential. Not its full potential, that's still a way off, but at least to a higher standard than they have been in past weeks. They need to not put themselves under unnecessary pressure. In tennis you get the concept of unforced errors, where you make mistakes without the opponent pressuring you into those mistakes. Well, they need to do the same here. Put the pressure back on the Wallabies. The only thing you can do with the pain of a loss that results from a loss as bad as the one in last weekend is to give that pain to someone else, to another team, and they need to give that pain back to the Wallabies this weekend. They need to set out a clear marker before the World Cup, because other teams are coming up. Wales are in contention. The Wallabies are a bit of a dark horse. The Springboks are very, very good this year. England, always a chance. Ireland, of course, always so strong in the Northern Hemisphere, and they've beaten All Blacks before. So I think at least 5 teams who could win this year's World Cup based on current form. Argentina, always in there with a chance if they can also, sort out their disciplinary issues. So let's see. Let's see what happens in the World Cup. But yeah, the All Blacks, nothing huge they need to change. They just need to calm down a bit, maybe. Focus on their core roles, on what each player needs to do, and then it'll all come together. We don't need a Superman. It's a team of supermen, this All Blacks team. It's always been, the All Blacks are the pinnacle of rugby. They don't need to do extra things to be, really, really good. They just need to do their core things very well, and then the whole will come together. So I'm hoping that they can go back to basics for this weekend. All right, so that game between New Zealand and Australia is this coming Saturday morning, South African time, I think at 9:30. I won't be able to watch because I'm traveling to a conference in Kenya, so they're also, well, that's a good segue. There won't be a Blindside episode next week, unfortunately, but the following week I'll be back once I'm back in South Africa. Alright, then the second game from the past weekend, South Africa beat Argentina by 46 points to 13 in Argentina. A really, really good performance by the Springboks. They were very physical on the front foot. They kicked very well. Andre Pollard looks like he's coming into very good form before the World Cup. If he goes down, I don't think Elton Yankees can play on the same level as him, but that's okay. At least your starting fly half, you can rely on him. And he can hopefully perform very well. So, yeah, that game, I think South Africa very much deserved to win, and it's their first Rugby Championship title since 2009. Their sort of first Tri-Nations Rugby Championship title since 2009. So all in all, I think very well deserved. They really they deserve to win this title. They played well throughout the tournament. Obviously drew against the All Blacks, beat the Wallabies, beat Argentina. So full credit to them. And I think Rassie Erasmus is reaping the rewards for a more systematic approach to his management and coaching, both of local and international players. So good to see Springbok rugby doing well again. It's always obviously one looks forward to All Blacks against Springbok games, and in the past few years the Springboks haven't been on an upward trajectory. So it's good to see them back heading up to where they'll feel they belong. So let's see if they can keep that momentum going into the World Cup. They're playing against Argentina this weekend again, Saturday afternoon, I think at 5 p.m. Probably at 5, not at 7. 7's a bit too late. Probably 5 p.m. It's not a Rugby Championship game or anything like that, but it's just another game to get in some exercise and a run out before the World Cup. Then moving on to other international rugby in the Northern Hemisphere, Ireland beat Italy by 29 points to 10. I think that was pretty much expected. And then England beat Wales by 33 points to 19. And I thought in that game, I was surprised by the result, but George Ford played really well at fly half. For Wales, unfortunately, Gareth Anscombe suffered an injury and he's now out of the World Cup, so very sad news for him. He, of course, played for the Chiefs a few years ago in New Zealand, and he's been playing very well for Wales. So sad to see him now having to miss the World Cup due to injury. But that's always the risk with these pre-World Cup games. You want players to play together, get some more experience, get combinations going, but then the risk of injury is heightened, of course, because players aren't sort of match tough. They haven't been playing for a few weeks, a few months maybe in some cases. So, interesting results there in the Northern Hemisphere. This coming weekend, the fixtures, I mentioned New Zealand against Australia, and we've got Wales against England, so the return fixture, South Africa versus Argentina, Italy versus Russia, and France against Scotland. Of those, the one with the most sort of importance in terms of result is the New Zealand versus Australia game for the Bledisloe Cup, but let's see what happens with the others as well. Interesting to see who the coaches select, what combinations they want to try. I'm sure we'll see more experimental teams from especially South Africa and Argentina. I think South Africa, they did release the team yesterday, the starting lineup, and Elton Jantjies is starting at fly half. So just to give you one indication, they're trying out a few different combinations before the World Cup. Alright, then domestic rugby, the Mitre 10 Cup, New Zealand's version of the Currie Cup. Results, we had Northland beat Southland by 27 points to 17. The second game was a draw between Auckland and North Harbour, 28 points all. North Harbour could have won it with a last-minute penalty, but unfortunately that kick went wide. The Tasman Marcos, they thumped Wellington. Jeez. 45 points to 8. I did not see that one coming. Tasman looking very good. Taranaki beat Counties Manukau by 34 points to 29. Waikato beat Canterbury by 31 points to 28. So Canterbury there, my team, losing unfortunately. But that was a very good game. And I highly recommend watching these Mitre 10 Cup games. They're usually quality rugby, high scoring affairs, lots of tries. Bay of Plenty beat Otago by 50 points to 7. And then the last game, Hawke's Bay beat Manawatu by 31 points to 13. The fixtures for this coming Saturday, so that'll be the 17th of August. Northland versus Auckland, North Harbour versus Counties Manukau, Hawke's Bay versus Wellington, Manawatu versus Taranaki, Otago versus Southland, and that game is a Ranfurly Shield defence. So part of the local competitions in New Zealand is the Ranfurly Shield, and the only way you can win the Ranfurly Shield is by beating the team who currently holds it at their home stadium. So in this game, if Southland beats Otago, then Southland will take the Ranfurly Shield back home. So it's a nice concept, nice sort of extra challenge on the line for teams to think about when they have to defend the Ranfurly Shield. And then we've got the pick of the weekend, I think, is Canterbury against Tasman. So Canterbury versus the Marcos. Let's see if Canterbury can pick up their game after losing last week to Waikato. Let's see if Tasman can keep their momentum going. And then the final game of this coming weekend, we've got Bay of Plenty versus Waikato. In the Currie Cup in South Africa, results, Western Province thumped the Pumas by 45 points to 14. The Sharks beat Free State by 27 points to 20 in Durban. And then last one, I was happy about this one. The Blue Bulls just beat the Lions by 31 points to 26, and that was at Emirates Airline Park. So very happy to see the Blue Bulls sneak that one. I was happy to see them get over the line, but a few close games. So whereas in New Zealand, I think you're going to see more tries in the games. In South Africa with the Currie Cup, you'll probably see closer games. Depends on your preference, of course, what you prefer to watch. And then fixtures for the coming weekend, we've got one game per day. So we've got one game on one game on Friday, then one game on Saturday and one game on Sunday. So nice rugby spread out over the weekend. On Friday, we've got Griquas against Western Province. On Saturday, we've got Pumas versus Free State. And Sunday, we've got the Lions against the Sharks. And I think that last one will probably be the pick. Although Griquas versus Province is also a very good game. So try and watch those two if you can. In terms of the table, we've got Griquas on top on 15 points. The Lions are second, also on 15. The Free State are on 12 points. And Western Province are on fourth, also on 12 points. Right, I think I'll end it there for this week, for episode 9. Thank you all once again for joining me. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast. Please share it with your friends all over your social media platforms. Please tell people about the podcast. And thank you all for giving some of your time this week to listen to this episode, to catch up on the latest rugby news. Let's see what happens if the All Blacks can bounce back against the Wallabies this weekend. Obviously, I hope so. I'll see the result once I get off my flight. So I'm hoping to get off that flight to good news, to see a 50 points to 0 thrashing of the Wallabies at the hands of the All Blacks, but that might be too much to hope for. But hey, a man can dream, right? I didn't think I'd be talking about such a big All Blacks loss this year, especially building up to the World Cup. But maybe this is now good. I thought the All Blacks had been playing pretty poorly this whole year, and they've now been beaten soundly by the Wallabies. So this should act as a real wake-up call for them, for the coach and for the players. They need to start getting things right now. It's getting very serious now before the World Cup, so the time for action and change is now. And I hope that they can implement some new plans and strategies in the next few games and weeks before the World Cup. Alright, I'll talk to you all again in 2 weeks' time. I hope you have a good weekend ahead. Enjoy all the rugby, and I'll talk to you all again soon. Thanks again. Bye.